crimes so disturbing that no one could believe they were carried out by children. Some broke down when they heard their fate, while others showed reactions that shocked everyone in the courtroom. Here are 20 of the most dangerous kids ever sentenced to life in prison, and how they reacted when reality finally hit. Number 20. Carly Gregg. Carly Gregg was a 15-year-old from Mississippi who, on the surface, lived a normal life with her mother and stepfather. In 2024, however, she became the center of a case that shocked the entire country. In March of that year, after a confrontation, Carly picked up a gun and unalived her mother inside their house. Prosecutors said that after the shooting, she tried to carry on as if nothing had happened. She allegedly used her mother's phone to send messages and even invited a friend over to the home. Later, when her stepfather returned from work, Carly attempted to unalive him as well, but the weapon failed to fire. He managed to escape and call the police, and she was arrested shortly after. During the trial, prosecutors argued the attack was intentional and planned, pointing to her actions after the killing as evidence. Her defense team focused on her mental health, saying she had been dealing with serious emotional and psychological struggles. The jury ultimately found Carly guilty of unaliving her mother and attempting to unalive her stepfather. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 19. Paul Gingerich. At just 12 years old, Paul Gingerich became one of the youngest people in the United States to be locked up. In 2010, Paul met and befriended 15-year-old Colt Lundy. Together, they came up with a plan to unalive Colt's stepfather, Phil Danny. According to Colt, he would get along fine with his stepfather unless he drank, in which case Phil would become uncontrollable. Paul and Colt retrieved a shotgun and waited in the living room for Phil, shooting him immediately when he walked in. They then stole some items from the home, including Phil's wallet, and ran away in his car. Eventually, the two boys and a third unnamed accomplice were found and brought back to be charged and tried. While the pair initially received a near-life sentence, their sentences were challenged by lawyers who believed Indiana's justice system had been too harsh on them. Eventually, Paul's law was passed, which allowed for both Paul and Colt to be released early on home detention and constant surveillance. Number 18. Joshua Phillips. Joshua Phillips was a 14-year-old from Florida whose name became widely known after a tragic case involving his young neighbor, 8-year-old Maddie Clifton. In 1998, Joshua brought Maddie into his home while his mother was out. He claimed that Maddie got hurt while they were playing and that he had initially brought her inside to help her. However, when Maddie would not stop crying and claimed she would go home and tell her mother about the incident, he panicked. Joshua's lawyers later claimed that his stepfather had been violent toward him and that the 14-year-old was terrified of what would happen. So, he acted on impulse and unalived Maddie. Instead of telling anyone what happened, Joshua hid her body inside his room and continued living in the house for days while the neighborhood searched for the missing child. He even joined search efforts, standing alongside neighbors and police as they tried to find her. The truth was eventually discovered while his mother was cleaning his bedroom. At trial, prosecutors argued Joshua made deliberate choices after the incident, especially when he hid what happened and stayed silent while people searched. Joshua was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Years later, changes to juvenile sentencing laws led to a new hearing in 2017, where his punishment was reduced to 40 years, a near-life sentence. Number 17. Christopher Pitman. Christopher Pitman was a 12-year-old from South Carolina whose case became one of the most debated juvenile trials in the United States. In 2001, Christopher was living with his grandparents, Joe and Joy Pitman, who had legal custody of him. One night, inside their home, Christopher used a firearm to unalive both of them before setting the house on fire and leaving the scene in their car. When he was arrested, he lied, claiming that a black man had broken into the home, unalived his grandparents, burned their home, and kidnapped him. Despite the depravity in his case, the defense team argued that Christopher's irrational behavior was actually because a family doctor had prescribed him a new medication. The Zoloft case became controversial because it challenged whether offenders who had their medications changed could plead insanity. In Christopher's case, it worked. While he was initially looking at a life term, a judge agreed, and Christopher was released from prison after serving 18 years. In 2023, Number 16. Kuntrell Jackson. Kuntrell Jackson was just 14 years old when he became involved in a robbery that would change his life forever. In 2000, Kuntrell and two other teens planned to rob a video store in Arkansas. According to the defense team, Contrell did not know one of the teens was carrying a weapon when they walked inside. During the robbery, when the store clerk refused to hand over money, the teen unalived her. Even though Contrell did not carry out the actual attack, prosecutors argued that he willingly took part in the robbery and shared responsibility for what happened. His defense team focused on his age and background, arguing that he was a young teenager who did not fully understand how serious the situation would become. Contrell was convicted and originally sentenced to life in prison. His case later reached the United States Supreme Court, leading to new rulings on juvenile sentencing. Number 15. Evan Miller. 14-year-old Evan Miller was living in Alabama when he became involved in a robbery that turned fatal. Evan and another teenager went to the home of 52-year-old Cole Cannon. Prosecutors said Cole was one of Evan's mother's dealers. Both boys believed he had a lot of money lying around. After spending the evening at his trailer, doing illegal substances, Cannon was beaten, and the trailer was later set on fire while he was still inside. The fire and injuries led to his unaliving. Because Evan was only 14, the case quickly drew national attention. His defense team pointed to his age and difficult upbringing, arguing he lacked maturity and had been heavily influenced by the older teen with him. Evan was convicted of capital unaliving and automatically sentenced to life in prison without parole. His case later reached the United States Supreme Court, which ruled that mandatory life without parole sentences for juveniles were unconstitutional. After a new hearing, Evan was resentenced to life with the possibility of parole. Number 14. Aiden Fucci. Before his name made national headlines, Aiden Fucci was just another 14-year-old living in a suburban Florida neighborhood. That changed in 2021, when he became the main suspect in the unaliving of 13-year-old Tristan Bailey, a girl from the same area. The two had been seen together, walking through their neighborhood late at night. Hours later, Tristan was discovered in a nearby wooded area after a violent attack that resulted in her being unalived. Investigators began piecing together her final movements and quickly identified Aiden as the last person seen with her. Surveillance footage and other evidence, prosecutors said, strongly linked him to the crime. The case drew widespread attention across the country, especially after authorities revealed that Aiden took photos inside a police vehicle following his arrest and shared them online. In court, prosecutors argued the attack was intentional and extremely violent. His defense team initially prepared for a trial, but later changed direction. In 2023, Aiden pleaded guilty in court. He was sentenced to life in prison, with any chance of release only possible after he spends decades behind bars. Number 13. William Will Cornick. Students at a secondary school in Leeds, England, knew William Cornick as a quiet 15-year-old, but in 2014, he became known across the country as a violent criminal. His victim was Anne Maguire, a 61-year-old teacher who had spent decades teaching at the school. During a lesson, Will suddenly launched a violent assault against her, stabbing her repeatedly. Anne Maguire passed away from her injuries, and William reportedly brought a bottle of alcohol to celebrate. Investigators found messages and online chats that suggested Will had thought about the attack beforehand, offering £10 to anyone who would unalive Anne. Prosecutors told the court this showed the act was planned. They argued he understood what he was doing and went through with it anyway. His defense team argued he was an honor roll student, with perfect attendance, and had no past record. They claimed this was an isolated incident brought on by temporary insanity. The court ultimately found Will guilty and sentenced him to life in prison. He received a minimum term of 20 years before any chance of release, meaning he will spend most of his life behind bars. Number 12. Sharon Carr. In 1992, Sharon carried a knife with her while walking through her neighborhood. During that time, she encountered 18-year-old Katie Ratcliffe. Sharon suddenly launched an attack that resulted in Katie being unalived. At the time, she was known as a troubled child who had already shown signs of serious behavioral issues both at school and at home. As investigators looked deeper, they found evidence that Sharon had talked about wanting to harm someone even before the incident happened. She was 12 years old in 1992 when the stabbing occurred. It was not until 1997, when Sharon tried to unalive a classmate, that the crime resurfaced. For so long, because of the brutality of Katie's unaliving, police had suspected it was an adult male. Sharon bragged about the unaliving after being reprimanded for attacking her classmate, and that was when investigators started looking at her as a suspect. She confessed to the crime immediately, almost as if she was bragging about it to investigators, too. While she was given a lengthy sentence, Sharon had every opportunity of being released, but has remained in prison since the 90s and will likely stay there forever because of her disruptive behavior. She has reportedly tried to attack and unalive other inmates and prison guards routinely. Sharon Carr is believed to be a danger to society. Number 11. Erin Caffey. Erin Caffey was 16 years old when she helped plan an attack on her own family in Texas. In 2008, after her parents tried to end her relationship with her boyfriend, prosecutors said Erin began discussing a plan with him to remove her family. She shared details about the house and helped set everything in motion. One night, her boyfriend and two of his friends entered the home and carried out the attack, which resulted in Erin's mother and two younger brothers being unalived. Her father survived and later told investigators what happened. Prosecutors argued Erin played a central role by planning and encouraging the attack, even though she was not inside the house when it happened. Her defense claimed she was emotionally manipulated and controlled by her boyfriend. Erin was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Years later, while serving her sentence, she gave an interview to Dr. Phil from prison. During the interview, Erin said she accepted responsibility for her role and spoke about guilt and regret. She described the pain of knowing what her actions caused and said she wished she could change the past, while acknowledging she would likely spend most of her life behind bars. Number 10. Christy Parisian and Jaslyn Smith. In 2021, Dwight Grant was attacked by 17-year-old Christy Parisian and 16-year-old Jaslyn Smith. The two teens lured him outside of the Miramar apartment complex, where they reportedly started attacking him, eventually unaliving him. They then disposed of the body in the nearby dump, and it was not until 2 days later that Dwight's lifeless body was found. Apparently, Christy and Jaslyn acted with a third teen, Andre Clements, and were enraged that Dwight had hooked up with Andre's ex-girlfriend. The trio repeatedly stabbed him with a knife and even brought out a sword to attack Dwight. Once his body was found, police reviewed the security footage and saw the shocking scene unfold. They arrested the trio at the apartment complex, with Christy and Jaslyn immediately pleading guilty. Andre, on the other hand, claimed he was innocent, and when the judge scoffed at the claim, his defense attorneys tried to get him out on a technicality. Christy and Jaslyn both pleaded guilty to manslaughter charges and were sentenced to 25 years each. Andre's case is still pending. Number 9. Muhammad Umar Khan. Harvey Wilgoose, 15, was unalived by Muhammad Umar Khan, also 15, at All Saints Catholic High School in Sheffield in February 2025. The former friends had been involved in a dispute at the school just a few days ago, with each boy taking opposite sides. The dispute then escalated over social media, after which the prosecution claimed Umar made the decision to unalive Harvey. On February 3rd, Umar brought a knife to school, confronted Harvey in the hall, and then started stabbing him. The scene was captured on the school's security cameras and played in court. Umar tried to argue temporary insanity, claiming that he was not in full control of his actions at the time. However, the prosecution pointed toward his earlier record at a previous school. They claimed this was Umar's desperate attempt at looking tough in front of his peers. Despite his age, the judge raised the minimum prison term to 16 years, meaning Umar would have to spend a minimum of that time before he is eligible for parole or could ultimately serve his whole life locked up. Number 8. Connor Hilton. In 2023, 19-year-old Connor Hilton shot and unalived his friend, Ethan Riley. He had invited Ethan and another friend, Benjamin Bleak, to his home in Friendswood in December 2023 and plotted to unalive both of them mid-conversation. Connor claimed the attack was not premeditated and that it was a decision he made after they had arrived at his home. The investigating officer found Connor sitting outside on the curb, waiting for police officers to arrive. He claimed that he took a shotgun out of his mother's safe. While the court did not undermine Connor's crimes, they also asserted that his mother, Jonice Hilton, shared at least 75% of the blame for allowing her son access to a shotgun in the first place. Jonice claimed that her son had talked her into buying the gun, but the court ruled that Connor had disciplinary issues and Jonice was informed that he would act on his homicidal tendencies. Number 7. Alyssa Bustamante. In 2009, Alyssa lived with her grandparents and had a history of mental health struggles and troubling behavior at school. Despite appearing quiet to many people, investigators later uncovered disturbing thoughts she had shared online and in private journals. One evening, Alyssa lured her 9-year-old neighbor, Elizabeth Alton, into a wooded area near their homes. Once there, Alyssa carried out a violent attack that resulted in Elizabeth being unalived. Afterward, she returned home and attempted to act normal, even writing about the incident in her journal. Her defense team focused on her mental health, saying she struggled with depression and emotional instability and needed long-term treatment. Alyssa pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. In 2012, she was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years, ensuring she will spend most of her life behind bars. Number 6. Chauncey Luna. When investigators asked Chauncey Luna why he had unalived his classmate, Christopher Lane, Chauncey replied that he did it out of boredom. Christopher was a 22-year-old Australian studying at a university in Oklahoma on a baseball scholarship. Investigators claimed that Chauncey and 2 other accomplices tracked him down while he was jogging and shot him in the back of the head. At the time of the unaliving, Chauncey was only 16 years old, and his defense team argued he was still a minor. However, his 2 older accomplices later confessed that not only was Chauncey the one who pulled the trigger, but he was the one who came up with the plan in the first place. No one from the trio knew Christopher beforehand, and this attack was completely random. One of the 3 teens confessed in exchange for a lesser sentence. The other 2, including Chauncey, were sentenced to life in prison. Number 5. Kyle Hooper and Amber Wright. Kyle Hooper and Amber Wright were 2 Florida teenagers involved in the highly publicized case surrounding the unaliving of 15-year-old Seth Jackson. Seth had been in a relationship with Amber, but the 2 broke up shortly before the incident. Prosecutors said tensions grew after the breakup, and Amber began communicating with Kyle and others about confronting Seth. According to investigators, Seth was lured to a house under the belief he was going to meet Amber. Instead, he walked into a planned ambush. Inside the home, Kyle and others carried out a violent attack that resulted in Seth being unalived. Authorities later said Amber helped set up the meeting and knew what was going to happen. During the trial, prosecutors argued both Kyle and Amber played key roles in planning and carrying out the attack. Both were convicted and received life sentences, with the possibility of parole only after decades behind bars. Number 4. Eldon Samuel. In 2014, Eldon was living with his father and younger brother inside their small apartment. The teen was reportedly unhappy with his father's strictness and admitted that he hated his 13-year-old brother, who had Down syndrome. During an argument, Eldon shot and unalived his father. His brother was reportedly hiding under the bed. Eldon then dragged him out and hacked him with a machete. The arresting officer claimed that the scene was gruesome. In fact, when the local newspaper published details of the crime the next day, readers wrote to complain of the graphic details. What was worse was Eldon's lack of remorse. He calmly told investigators that he had unalived his father and brother, that he hated his brother, and that he felt as if he had not done the wrong thing. His defense team tried to argue his age, but the judge could see that Eldon was a danger to society. He was tried as an adult and sentenced to life in prison. Number 3. Sonny Christopher Kim. In 2016, just 6 days before Christmas, Sonny Christopher Kim, then 16, shot and unalived his sister. James Brazel, his stepfather, claimed that after he and Kim's mother went up to bed, they heard gunshot noises coming from downstairs. James came down to find 23-year-old Ashley Kim unalived with 8 gunshot wounds, and Kim hovering over his sister's body. James claimed that Kim tried to point the gun at him, but could not load it in time and was disarmed. According to friends and family, Kim was a model citizen, an honor roll student, and an overall good kid. James and Kim's mother claimed that his eyes were black at the time of the shooting, and that he was not in control of his actions. His defense team pleaded the same and asked for leniency given Kim's temporary lapse. However, the judge believed that Kim planned to unalive his entire family and that he deserved maximum punishment. Kim was sentenced to life in prison and will not be eligible for parole until 30 years of his life term have been served. Number 2. Ethan Crumbley. Ethan Crumbley was a 15-year-old sophomore at Oxford High School and had been showing troubling behavior in the days leading up to the incident, including violent drawings and written warnings of a school shooting. One day, Ethan brought a firearm to school and carried out a shooting inside the building. Students and teachers rushed to hide or escape as police responded and took Ethan into custody the same day. 4 students were unalived and several more were injured. The case was open and shut. Prosecutors argued the attack was planned and deliberate. They pointed to messages, online searches, and actions before the incident as evidence that Ethan understood what he was doing. Ultimately, Ethan pleaded guilty to multiple charges. In 2023, a judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the attack carried out at just 15 years old. Number 1. Lee Boyd Malvo. Lee Boyd Malvo was 17 years old when he became one of the most feared teenagers in the United States. In 2002, Malvo and an older accomplice carried out a series of coordinated attacks across several states, targeting random people in public places. The incidents spread fear across the country and kept entire cities on edge for weeks. Authorities said Malvo worked closely with the older man, traveling with him and taking part in the attacks. The violence resulted in multiple victims being unalived and several others injured. Because the targets appeared to be chosen at random, the case drew massive national attention and led to one of the largest manhunts in modern United States history. Eventually, Malvo was arrested and taken into custody. Malvo was convicted and originally given multiple life sentences. After years of appeals and resentencing hearings, he continues to serve several life terms, meaning he will spend most of his life behind bars.